Chapter 4. The Jinxed Broomstick. I flicked my wand at my teaching robes. The heavy black fabric rose and settled around my shoulders, each fold falling into place. The silver clasp snapped shut against my throat. The gash in my leg throbbed, an irritating distraction that pulled my attention from more pressing matters. Time for professional assistance. I raised my wand. My Patronus erupted in silver radiance, a doe casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. "Where are you?" I asked. She bounded through the dungeon walls. Within moments, another silver form materialized, a skeletal cat, staffroom, sorting through confiscated contraband. Flitwick's voice echoed through the cat. The cat dissolved into wisps of light. My usual stride required modification. Each step had to be calculated. Weight shifted to accommodate the persistent ache. The wound pulled against my bandages. Then I spotted Harry, Weasley boy, and the brown-haired girl near the fountain. Potter's unruly black hair caught the sunlight. Weasley's flame-red head bent close to Granger's bushy brown curls. Their shoulders hunched around, trying to hide something. "What's that you've got there, Potter?" The boy jumped. His precious cargo slipped in nerveless fingers. "Quidditch through the ages, golden letters worn smooth by countless hands. Library books are not to be taken outside the school." I extended my hand. "Give it to me." 5 points from Gryffindor. The book's weight was satisfying in my palm. I tucked the volume under my arm and continued toward the castle doors. The staff room's warmth struck me after the courtyard's Arctic assault. Heat seeped through my robes, bringing relief to joints stiffened by cold. I pushed through the door and sealed it behind me. The room bore decades of accumulated scent. Old parchment, spilled tea, lingering traces of countless staff meetings. Portraits of former headmasters dozed in their frames. Flitwick hunched over the central oak table. His collection of confiscated pranks spread across the scarred wood. Dung bombs arranged by potency. Trick wands sorted by manufacturer. Suspicious sweets that glowed unnatural colors. His gnarled fingers moved as he catalogued each item in his leather-bound ledger. "Pa, you're favoring that leg," he observed without lifting his head, astute as always. I settled into my preferred chair, the leather cushions molded to my form. Someone has meddled with the locks, trying to force them. I got this wound. When I went closer to examine the damage, our three-headed guardian doesn't take kindly to visitors. Cerberus, blimey, you tangled with Fluffy. How'd you manage that without losing the leg? Twick cackled and produced his wand. "Hold still, then. Can't have the potions master hobbling about like some decrepit invalid." He raised the wand, Vulnerus and Anta. The spell flowed over my wound like cool water. White radiance penetrated damaged tissue. I felt torn muscle fibers knitting back together, blood vessels sealing their ruptures. "Again," I instructed. "Vulnera, Sanan." Flitwick produced fresh bandages and wrapped them round my calf in neat spirals. "Blasted thing," I said. "How are you supposed to keep your eyes on all 3 heads at once?" The door creaked. Black hair, green eyes. Potter stood frozen in the doorway. "Potter," I roared, dropping my robes over the bandaged leg. He remained frozen, mouth working soundlessly. I just wondered if I could have my book back. The audacity was breathtaking. Get out, out. The door slammed shut. The first Quidditch match of the season dawned cold and silver gray. The kind of sky that promised either a downpour or a miracle. I took my place in the stands, high above the pitch, robes drawn tight against the wind. I do not enjoy Quidditch. I never have. But I watched not the quaffle, not the score. Potter. He looked ridiculous, perched on that broom, narrow-shouldered and pale against the sky. But he flew well, too well. The kind of balance that cannot be taught. As the game progressed, I felt it before I saw it. A shift, an unnatural twitch in the air, like a static charge in a sealed room. Then his broom jerked. It was subtle at first, small lurches like a nervous horse. But then it began to buck, sharp, violent. Potter clung to the handle, trying to stay upright. Someone is cursing his broom. I have counter-cursed. I can't break eye contact. I began to mutter under my breath. Counter-curses, stabilization charms, anything I could think of. Finite incantatum. Protego, ra, finite incantate. My eyes never left the boy. Stay on, I murmured. Stay on, you foolish child. Then a sudden tug. The back hem of my cloak pulled sharply, then dropped. I stiffened. I turned swiftly. Smoke. The edge of my robes had caught fire. My wand was out before I breathed. A sharp flick, a whispered charm. Extinguo. The flame died with a hiss. I glanced around, but the stands behind me had already descended, been to chaos. Students shouting, craning to see Potter's struggle. No one looked guilty. No one nearby seemed even aware of what had happened. I returned my gaze to the pitch. Potter's broom looked steady now. Potter dipped low, then dived, and when he rose again, he held the snitch. The crowd roared. The match was over. Quidditch, a child's diversion, yet the fate of the house cup hangs upon it as though it were of the utmost consequence. 170 points to Gryffindor, a paltry 62 Slytherin. Preposterous. True merit lies not in flailing upon broomstick, but in the mastery of spells, the precision of potion-making, and the application of intellect. Still, the scoreboard cannot be ignored. I must devise a strategy, subtle and exacting, to narrow the gulf between the totals. Slytherin's honor will not be so carelessly squandered by the folly of a game. By mid-afternoon, the entire school had invented half a dozen versions of the morning's events. According to the Hufflepuffs, I had hexed the broom out of spite. The Ravenclaws said I'd tried to teach Potter a lesson. A pair of third-year Gryffindors swore they'd seen flames burst from my wand. I ignored it all. Gossip didn't concern me, except when it reached the ears of those who mattered. Outside the greenhouses, I crossed paths with Hagrid. He was lugging a crate that smelled like dragon dung, and had just dropped it with a grunt when he turned and saw me. "They're saying you were jinxing the broom," he muttered. I gave him a slow, deliberate look. "Of course they are." He shifted his weight, uneasy. "You were muttering something. looked suspicious. I was counter-cursing. I said coldly, "Not that I expect you to know the difference." He blinked, beard bristling slightly. "Didn't mean nothing by it. Just people notice things." Dumbledore, I stepped past him, and his muttering faded behind me. The staffroom was warm with firelight, but it felt colder than the November wind outside. I had scarcely stepped inside before I felt it. The hush, the pause in conversation, the sideways glances that slid across me like blades. Whispers died by on lips, but the silence spoke loudly enough. Sprout was perched on the edge of a chair, her muddy boots drying by the hearth. She busied herself with her gloves as though they were the most fascinating things she had ever owned. Flit's mustache twitched in a way that might have been nervousness or amusement, or both. Even Sinistra, who usually had little to say to anyone, seemed to have discovered the pattern in the carpet and Minerva. Her eyes followed me the way a hawk fixes on a mouse. Not a word, but a question in the air between us. "What were you doing at the match?" I lowered myself into a chair, arranging my robes carefully over my injured leg. "Do excuse me," I said into the silence. I had not realized this was the hour set aside for gossip. Flitwick squeaked something about parchment and scuttled bow from the room. Sprout's cheeks colored. She found sudden business with her gloves. Still, the air pressed close with suspicion. I could almost hear their thoughts rattling in the rafters. I did not know he would stoop so low to win a match. "Really?" I murmured, drawing a quill from my sleeve and setting parchment before me. If I had wanted Potter's head, I would hardly have chosen to do it in full view of the entire school. One would think I had more subtlety than that. No one answered. The fire cracked. The stairs lingered. Minerva broke the silence at last. "Severus, there are whispers. Some say you were interfering with Potter's broom. Tell me it isn't true." I set down my quill and looked at her over the parchment. "Of course, Minerva. I devote my weekends to murdering Gryffindors in plain sight, in front of hundreds of witnesses. It relieves the tedium of marking." Her mouth tightened. "This is serious." "On that we agree," I said, while you and the rest of the stands were gawping at the sky. Someone cursed Potter's broom. I was countering it. Perhaps, instead, speculating about my hobbies. We should focus on the person in the shadows who thought a boy's death. The words hung in the room like smoke. Flitwick shifted in his chair, his bright eyes flicking nervously from me to Minerva. Sprout looked down at her muddy gloves, her face troubled. I tapped the quill against the parchment, deliberately slow. "You may remain here and whisper, or you may walk with me to the headmaster. Flitwick, Sprout, you too, Minerva. This matter is larger than house squabbles. Someone inside this castle is meddling in things best left alone. And unless you wish to see another broom plunge from the sky, I suggest we speak with Dumbledore." Sprout swallowed hard, nodded once. Flitwick gathered his robes. Minerva hesitated a heartbeat longer than Rose. Her expression set. The scrape of their chairs across the flagstones was the only answer I needed. Maybe I should see come too." Professor Quirrell rose to his feet. I turned on him, Splendid idea. Nothing steadies a crisis like an account delivered one consonant at a time. Do try to finish before dawn, Quirrell. Sprout drew closer, lowering her voice. I saw Albus on the way to here. He is going to the 3rd floor. The corridor lay silent, the sort of deep, pressing stillness that pressed against the bones like cold stones. I led Sprout, Flitwick, and Minerva cautiously along it. Their robes whispered over the flagstones, each step tentative, as though the castle itself held its breath. Sprout muttered under her breath, "I still don't like this. The place gives me the creeps." "Perfectly reasonable," I said. "It is not meant for comfort. It is meant for secrets." Minerva's gaze was fixed ahead, unyielding. "Focus, all of you. Let's find Dumbledore." We turned a corner, and there he was, Albus, standing in what had once been a classroom. Dusty desks were stacked along the walls, draped in moth-eaten sheets. At the far end, a plain glass panel stood, framed by dust-darkened wood. Its surface was flawless, unnaturally still, almost impatient in its simplicity. "The mirror of Erised, Severus," he said, without looking up from the mirror. "I have been led to believe that today's Quidditch match was not entirely without incident." I bowed my head slightly. Potter's broom was cursed. I countered it. There was a jinx in play during the match. "Do you suspect anyone?" I could not check who. I had to maintain eye contact to countercurse. I said, "Are you sure it is not you?" asked Minerva for the last times. "I don't need to jinx a first year to death for a few house points. Minerva, I have every confidence in Severus. What matters now is discovering who has done this, and for what purpose." Sprout drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I don't understand. Who would curse a student's broom?" I let my gaze sweep the room, eyes settling on the mirror. "Someone who has a deep hatred with the boy. Then we ensure it does not happen again. I will see to the prefects, the teachers, and the wards," Minerva said, turning to leave. Flitwick and Sprout followed. "You stay, Severus," Dumbledore said. "You strengthened the wards." "Yes, and found traces, burned fabric, a charm trail, small feet." He nodded once. Slowly, I stepped further in. "If children are beginning to test the perimeter, then they are curious," he said gently, "which is only natural. They're vulnerable," I snapped. "And whatever's behind that door is not." This was reckless, Albus. Bringing the stone here, bringing him here. You've put temptation within arm's reach and surrounded it with children. His eyes met mine, calm as still water. "And yet it is here, because nowhere else would have held against what seeks it. You could have left it in Gringotts until Gringotts fell, as you well know." I paced a step, jaw tight. "There are other vaults. There are other means. There are," he agreed mildly, "but not ones I trust." "Then you've gambled the life of a child," I said. "He is not just a child," Dumbledore said. "He's 11, I snapped, "and the mark on his forehead is not a shield. He thinks I'm the enemy, you know." Dumbledore's gaze didn't waver. "And what do you think of that?" "I think it's safer," I said, voice low. so long as he sees me that way. If Dark Lord returns, I can protect him in the shadows. That's a lonely post to stand in, Dumbledore said. Just be sure you don't lose sight of him entirely, Severus. Even shadows cast warmth when the fire is near enough. I'm not here to warm him, I said. No, he murmured. But perhaps one day you may find you already have. I turned to the mirror. There were two of us. The man I saw in the mirror stood straighter. His robes were finely cut, untouched by ash or toil. He looked younger, but not by much. Less lined, more certain. And beside him, Sheet Lily, her expression, was soft without accusation. No anger, no sorrow. Her hand rested on my arm, as though she had always belonged there. She leaned in and said something soundless. I could not breathe. The scent of green grass, summer wind, and honeysuckle ghosted through the air. My hand had lifted, without permission, without thought, almost to the glass. I stopped myself. No, it was nothing but a cruel trick. A lure. The kind of enchantment designed not to trap bodies, but to unravel the soul. I turned from it. I would not look again. You are still planning to use this cursed thing as your final test? I asked. Yes, said Dumbledore.